Welcome everybody, and thank you for gracing us. Today's class is dedicated by Rabbi Chaim and Rachel Chaya Kagarlitsky in loving memory of Avigdor ben Leib, who passed away on the second day of Kislev. Today Nishmas Tzura, B'tzrar HaChaim, and may his soul continue to be a source of love and light and inspiration for you and the entire family and all of our people, and only have happy and good news. And thank you very, very much for your partnership and friendship, and may we be zoche te kitzav and u'sheich ne'afar v'hu b'seicham. Amen. I also want to mention and dedicate the class for a complete and speedy recovery to Miriam Yocheved Basbela Gittel, La'arichis Yamim V'shanim Tovos, many long, happy, prosperous, joyous, serene years full of productivity and abundance. Begashmius U'Baruchnius, and thank you. So today we are going to, Be'ezer Hashem, explore one of those stories that seems to be what you might call in English a hair-raising story, perplexed, enigmatic, really difficult to understand. It almost looks like there's a lot of pettiness or just very primal anger, resentment, and it's written that way, maybe so that it can really trigger us or challenge us or arouse us. As I once told you, it's interesting that in the Tanakh, I don't even think there's one story that ever ends with a good feeling. It's not a bedtime story where, Cinderella makes it out on the top and you could now fall asleep into a tranquil slumber. And the reason for that is because bedtime stories are intended for one purpose: to help you fall asleep. The stories of the Tanakh are intended to help you wake up. So if you want to put somebody to sleep, you finish off, they lived happily ever after. Okay, now I can go to sleep. If they lived happily ever after, I can also be happy. But if the story ends very differently, so how can I go to sleep? Something is challenging me. Something is stirring the pot. So this is one of those classic stories, and yet upon deeper reflection, we glean a tremendous insight, not just into the story, but also, like every story in Torah, into our own lives, into our own relationships with ourselves, with our loved ones, with Hashem, and with the world around us. So let's remember context. Yaakov Avinu, our patriarch Jacob, escapes the fury of his brother Esau. Esau wants to kill him after he discovered that he tried and took his blessings from his father. So now Yaakov is on the run. The Torah begins, Vayeitzei, Yaakov, Beersheva, Vayelech Harana. Yaakov left his oasis, the home of his parents in Beersheva, south of Israel. And then it's called Canaan. And Vayelech Harana, he goes to Mesopotamia. Today it's southern Turkey, a place called Haran. Till today we know where the place is. It's identified as Haran. Haran, Haran. There's even a well there that some claim that it's the well where Yaakov met Rachel. And that's what they claim. I don't know the authenticity of that, but somebody who was in Haran visited told me about it. His father, Yaakov's father, Yitzchak, instructed him to leave Canaan and search for a spouse in the remote town of Haran, where his uncle lives. Remember that Rivka has a brother, Lavan. Lavan lives in Haran. That's where Rivka grew up, and that's where she was taken from a generation earlier to go back to the land of Israel and marry Yitzchak. So now go back to your mother's hometown in order to build a family. Yaakov arrives in Haran. He goes to the well, and that's where he meets his first cousin. His first cousin, of course, is Rachel. Their parents are siblings. Yaakov's mother is Rivka. Rachel's father is Lavan, and Rivka and Lavan, as we know from earlier in the Torah, were siblings. And as a result of that, and when Yaakov meets her, the Torah describes how emotional Yaakov becomes. He breaks into sobbing. He immediately feels deeply emotionally connected to Rachel, and when he comes home to her father, he offers to work 7 years in order to gain her hand in marriage. The Torah describes that Lavan has two daughters. Lavan shtei banos. There's Shem Hagdola and Shem Haktana. The name of the older one is Leah, and the name of the younger one is Rachel. And the way the Torah describes it is Ve'enei Leah Rakos, which means Leah had weak eyes. Rachel hoise yefas Torah yefas Mara. Rachel was beautiful in her countenance. Yefei Torah yefas Mara, calmly and beautiful. It's interesting, from all features of Leah, it focuses on her eyes. Einei Leah Rakos. Her eyes were rach. Rach could mean soft or could mean weak. Now, 7 years have passed. Yaakov made a deal, 7 years of work, I'm your shepherd, and then I have the merit to enter into a covenant of marriage with Rachel. We all know the continuation of the story. Here is where things really, really become very interesting, to say the least. But let's see it inside. What happens next? It's your first source in your source sheet. All the source sheets are posted on the website if you ever want to retrieve it, theyeshiva.net, theyeshiva.net. Vayeitzei chav tes chav beis. That's Genesis chapter 29, verse 22. I translate in English not because I suspect that nobody here knows the Hebrew, but because there's a large audience that listens, either live or lines. I just want everybody to understand, so forgive me if I translate words that you already know their meaning. Vayesef Lavan es kol anshe hamakam vayas mishta. Beautiful beginning. Lavan gathers all the people of the place and he makes a feast. And here we see that a wedding should be celebrated. He gathers all the people and he makes a mishta, a party. Okay. Vayihi ba'erev. Nighttime comes. It looks like the party already started in the morning or in the afternoon. But now nighttime comes. Vayikach es Leah bitoi vayave Esau elav. And Lavan takes his Leah, his daughter, the older daughter, and he brings her to him, meaning he brings Leah to Yaakov. Vayavai Eleha, and Yaakov connects with Leah. He's intimate with Leah. Vayitan Lavan lazes pasir shivcha Leah bitur shivcha. And then Lavan grants to Leah his maid Zilpah, so that she could be there as a maidservant for Leah, his daughter. Pasuk chafei. Vayihi baboker. This happened all at night. It's before Thomas Edison's days. There's no electricity. Nobody lit candles, perhaps. Vayhi baboker. Morning comes. Dawn breaks. Sun rises. Vihine he Leah. 3 words. And behold, hine means, and behold, he Leah. She's Leah. She's not Rachel, she's Leah. When morning comes and Yaakov can see, suddenly he discovers there was a switch. Vayomer Lavan. So he comes to his father-in-law Lavan. He tells to Lavan, Mazoi sasisali, what have you done to me? I have served you. I have worked for you for Rachel. V'lomari misani, why did you deceive me? Ramai in Hebrew is a deceiver, someone who deceives you. It's called like a liar, a swindler, a crook. Lomari misani, why did you engage in this act of swindling me, deceiving me? Lavan explains, you have to understand, in our place, in our tradition, in our environment, it's inappropriate to give the younger before the older, to marry off the younger before the older. I could not give Rachel to you. But here's my deal, you could work for another unit of 7 years. Mali Shvu Azois actually means wait a week. And for another 7 years of labor, I'll give you also the second daughter. Vayas Yaakov Cain. Yaakov does so. Vayamali Shvu Azois. He waits for that Shavua, that week. Vayitin lo Yisrachel bitei lo Isha. Lavan gives Rachel, his daughter, as a wife for Yaakov. Vayitin Lavan Rachel bitei Bila Shivchasi lo Shivcha. And then he gives her the other maid, Bila, to work with Rachel. Vayavai gam el Rachel. And Yaakov now comes and connects also to Rachel. Vayehav gam es Rachel mi Leah. And he loves also Rachel from Leah. In English it's very hard to translate that because it's something very, very difficult. You can't translate it in English. Something is off here, right? He loves also Rachel from Leah. But if you would want to translate it, that's why so much gets lost in the translation, because the original Hebrew always has nuances that you simply can't translate, not because you don't want to, but because you can't. So it means he loves also Rachel, which means he loved Leah too, but mi Leah, more than Leah, vayavad imay oicheva shana macheres, and he stays another 7 years to work with Lavan. And then we learn about the birth of all the children, Reuven and Shimon and Levi and Yehuda, etc. The story continues. Great. Now, as usually is the case in the Torah, many of the details are omitted, forcing us really to use and employ our imagination to fill in the gaps. So I want to focus on one detail. I don't know if you thought about it, but when I read it for many years, I always think about this. If you look in the Pasuk Chaf Hey, the second line in the source sheets, Vayhi ba'boker, v'hinei Leah, right? What happened at that moment? He saw there was Leah. The next scene is Vayomer el Lavan. He went to Lavan. Now, presumably, Lavan wasn't in the tent. Right? This was a new groom and bride. Lavan brought Leah, and he obviously left. So Yaakov had to go to Lavan. So you'll say, yeah, well, the Torah is not going to tell you what address he went and he walked. Yeah, he went to Lavan, obviously. But here's the question. Did anything happen at that moment? Was there a conversation between Yaakov and Leah? We know that there was a conversation with his father-in-law, and ultimately he blamed him. But Leah was the person he discovered. So the Torah doesn't say. It just says, V'hinei Leah. He sees she's Leah, and he said to Lavan. Did he say anything to Leah? That the Torah does not say. Did they ever have a conversation about this? The Torah doesn't tell us. So here, it would seem like, okay, it's just skipping over that vignette. But when you look in the Midrash records an entire conversation that happened between them. And really, this is the function of Midrash, to fill in the gaps. What we're going to see here is, when you're going to read the story in the Midrash, it's like, where did they get this from? Come on, this does not say here. Very often people make this error when they read Midrash or hear Midrashim, and usually if you grew up and you had a good Jewish education in Chumash, your teacher quoted lots of Midrashim, even Rashi himself quotes many Midrashim. It seems like sometimes interesting stories, but where do these stories come from? If you remember, once we discussed the Midrash that when Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, came to the river, you remember, and her arm suddenly stretches out and extends, 50 feet, 75 feet, and she takes the basket. And I told you that if I was at a beach and my hand would extend 100 feet, I would run for my life. Call Hatzalah, call Misaskim, call Chaverim, call anybody, but I would run for my life. That's pretty spooky, right? The story itself is a beautiful story, but the Midrash comes and tells us this whole story. The truth is that Midrash needs to be understood, and this metaphor I heard from a senior colleague, Rabbi David Foreman from the Five Towns, Aleph Beit, and he once said beautifully, Midrash is like harmony to a song. What harmony is to a song, Midrash is to the text of Tanakh. And that's always the rule. I could sit down at the piano like many of us or our children, da, 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 you remember? Da, 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 da. And then you know your future is not necessarily in Carnegie Hall. You have other beautiful skills. And then somebody else sits down at the piano. Technically, I got the notes right. Da, 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 da. But it was lacking the geschmack, the luster, the flavor, the resonance, as we would call it, from the music. The text is the text. That's the basic. That's the meat and the potato. Da, 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 da. Or at another time it was da, 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 dum. I don't know where Yankee Doodle ended up, but da, 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 da. And then somebody else gives it its harmony. And it resonates in a different way. It becomes music to the ear, pun intended. The Midrash is not intended to substitute the notes or create a new song. It wants you to hear the full music. So here is a classic example. The Midrash gives this whole conversation that happened. At the surface, it's like, okay, it's an interesting story, but where did you get it from? You'll say it's an oral tradition. Okay, it's an oral tradition. It's part of Torah Shabbat Peh. And yet the text completely omits it. Is there any symbol in it? Is there any hint for it in the text? Now, this Midrash is not just an isolated Midrash. This Midrash is brought in many sources of the Midrash, which means this was an obvious, ingrained tradition among our sages. You have it in Midrash Rabbah, Parshas Vayeitzei, which is the classic Midrashic text on Chumash. It's called Midrash Rabbah. You also have it in Midrash Tanchuma. You have it in Das Keinim Mebali HaTosvos. You have it in Midrash Lekach Tov. You have it Tanchuma Bavin. Many Midrashim quote the story, even though it's in different words, but the theme is always the same. Let's see, in the most basic source, the second source, Bereshis Rabbah Ayin Yotes. This is Midrash Rabbah Bereshis, Parshas Vayeitzei, chapter 70, section 19. It's in Aramaic, I'll translate. V'chol hahu laila. That entire night that they were together, havatzavach la Rachel. Yaakov was calling out to her, Rachel, Rachel. In his mind, she is Rachel. This is the dream bride that he was dreaming about for 7 years. V'hi anyale. And she responded every time he said, Rachel. Yes. Rachel, what's going on? Whatever she said. So whenever he said Rachel, she responded. B'tzafra. Tzafra in Aramaic is morning. Morning comes. V'hi nehi Leah. Suddenly he takes a look and he's like, whoops. Whoops. Or whatever the equivalent of that was. It's the wrong one. V'hi nehi Leah. Behold, she's Leah. She's not Rachel. He didn't notice before. Amar la. He speaks to her. He doesn't go to Lavan. And he says to her, wow, ma ramyasa bas ramah. In simple English, we would say the apple did not fall far from the tree. Your father is a liar, a swindler, and you are. As the Midrash says it, wow, ramyasa, you are Ramai, you are a swindler, a deceiver. Bas ramah, you had a good education. You were very good, you're a proud daughter of your father, a really good nachas girl, living up to not what he says, but how he lives, lying like him. Lav b'layla hava karina Rachel va'at honestly? I don't understand. Throughout an entire night, I was calling out to you as Rachel. I identified you as Rachel, and you kept on responding as though you were Rachel. How can you do such a thing? Amra Leah. Leah responded in metaphor. Is sapar the Leslie Talmidim? Have you ever heard of a barber who has no students? Who's talking about a barber? He didn't ask her for a haircut. She didn't ask him for a haircut. Who's talking about a barber? But Leah is saying something. Sapar is like lispor. It's a barber, somebody who cuts hair. Did you ever hear of a barber who does not have students? What is Leah saying? Leah is saying that every craft in the world requires a mentor, requires a teacher. Whether you want to go into art or you want to become a barber. If you want to play baseball or you want to learn how to dance. If you want to learn how to write or you want to learn how to sew and tailor. Or become a great culinary chef. Every art skill in the world needs apprenticeship. You need somebody to teach you, to train you. You need educators, mentors. And a good craftsman creates students. So Leah is telling Yaakov, let me tell you something. Of course my father is a liar, and of course I take after my father, but we had a good mentor. Both of us have learned this trade, this art from somebody. We had a good barber to teach us how to hone our skills. Who was this mentor? She continues and she says, Loikach hayot seveach lach avuch Esau? Va'at anilei? Didn't your father call out to you and say, Esau? You're Esau? You brought my food? And what did you say? Yes, I'm Esau. Whoa, you guys are impressed with Leah, huh? You didn't know she was such a sharp cookie, huh? Yeah, yes. You're like, oh, this is a good Jewish marriage, right? You started up with me? You started up with me? I know what to answer. Everybody's laughing so loud. Wow, okay. Not everybody here understands the humor, but some understand the humor, right? It's like almost Yaakov. If you want to start with these types of remarks, I can give back. I can also give you a snidey remark if you want to talk about lying. Now this is a fascinating Midrash. The Torah doesn't mention this. The Torah says he went straight to Lavan. But the Midrash assumes that something happened. Indeed, he told her off. He challenged her. He compared her to her father. And she said, wait, we had a good teacher. Now, on a simple level, you could say, Leah was telling Yaakov something. She was maybe teaching him the rule that what goes around, comes around. And basically, Leah was saying, what just happened to you is a consequence of what happened between you and your father. You'll decide. I'm just giving a possible interpretation of this Midrash. In other words, Leah was really teaching Yaakov something and saying, look, this is really a continuum of the story that you began. Because if you think about it, it's almost the same story, it's just in reverse. Yitzchak summoned his oldest son to come to his room, to bring him food, to bring him game, and he would bless him before his passing. The oldest son was supposed to come in, and Yitzchak was supposed to connect him and bond. The last moment, what happened? The oldest son's position and blessings were hijacked. They were taken away by who? By the younger one. Yaakov Avinu came, identifies himself as Esau, and gets the blessings. Yes. And there was a parent who was involved. It was Rivka who said, very good. It was Rivka who said, come, bring me 2 goats, I'll prepare the food. She dresses him up in Esau's clothes, she covers him with the skin goats, and she sends him into Yitzchak. Leah says, look what happened here. Just like your father, you were expecting not the older one, you were expecting the younger one. Your father wanted the older one, you wanted the younger one. You wanted Rachel. At the last moment, there was a switch. And who did the switch? My daddy. And just like Yaakov and Rivka were in cahoots, me and my father were in cahoots, exactly. Furthermore, it was the same method. Not just the result was the same. Yitzchak could be deceived because he couldn't see. And why were you deceived? Because you couldn't see. Because it was nighttime. The Torah clearly says it was night, and then in the morning, you saw the truth. Yitzchak didn't see the truth in the morning because he still couldn't see. Yitzchak understood the truth when Esau came with the food. He realized there was a switch. So essentially what Leah is saying to Yaakov is, this is a continuation of the story that you began. That's one level of the Midrash. That's what would seem pretty obvious, yes. Interesting. Perhaps at this moment, yeah. Yeah. But the truth is that still something is very, very disturbing here. Let's assume for a moment that Yaakov is wrong with what he did. Let's assume, we're not going to get into that story at the moment. How does that exonerate Leah in deceiving him? Can I deceive somebody in a business deal because they deceived their brother in another business deal? I mean, that doesn't make sense. Let's say they were completely wrong in what they did. 100% wrong, 50% wrong, 1,000% wrong. So just because you sinned towards somebody else, therefore I'm allowed to sin towards you? Is that a moral justification? I mean, imagine a scene in the therapist's office, okay? He says to the therapist, there was this big Thanksgiving dinner that some people are preparing for, and you insulted me in front of the entire family. How can you do that to me? I went to bed in shame and disgrace. And his wife says, how dare you complain about this? 7 years ago, you lied to your father about the money that you took from the business account. You're a thug, you're a thief, you're a scoundrel, you're a ganav. You taught me how to be rude, obnoxious, selfish, narcissistic, and insulting. You're one good teacher. Thank you for showing me by example how to lie. We all know where this conversation is going. First of all, how productive is it? How meaningful is it? It's called a blame game. What is Leah really telling Yaakov? Is it just, Yaakov, you start up with me, I will start up with you. You lied, therefore I could lie. Especially if we think about the personalities that we're talking about. You're talking about the matriarch and patriarch of the Jewish people. That means every single Jew is a descendant of Yaakov, or Leah, or Rachel, or Bilhah, or Zilpah, but certainly Yaakov. What's the nature of this conversation? What did it do to the marriage? What did it do to the relationship? The Midrash says as a result of that, the connection between Yaakov and Leah became tense. It wasn't easy. Now, if Leah was really just criticizing Yaakov, meaning, look into your own heart before you criticize me, if that was the answer, okay, that's a very good conversation perhaps, but how does it justify what she does? So, today we're going to take this one step deeper. And I want to show you with God's grace, first of all, how they saw it all in the text. They saw it as the music, the harmony of the text. And in a very interesting way, you'll see how the sages read Chumash. Furthermore, it's going to show us an underlying subplot in the whole story that it's easy to miss when you read a story, because every story has so many different layers. And then it shows us why this conversation is so important, to be able to appreciate the entire continuum of this narrative. In Torah Shebeksav, there's a very interesting phenomenon. It's not paid attention to so much because it's mostly mysterious. And it's known as Kri versus Ksiv. Kri versus Ksiv means there are many words written one way, pronounced in a different way. Usually that's not the case. If you take the word Bereshis bara Elokim, it's written just as it's pronounced. Bereshis bara Elokim. But there are other words, you'll look in Chumash and it's Sefer Torah, it's written one way, but you can't pronounce it that way. Either it's not a complete word, a cohesive word that makes sense, or it's out of context. So it says clearly in the Chumash, Ksiv this, Kri this. It's written this way, pronounce it this way. And you have to question, what's the point? If you want it written this way, so why pronounce it differently? And if you want to pronounce it differently, just write it that way. And why only a few words? The answer, of course, is that's exactly the point. The point is there is a dissonance here between the way it's written and the way it's pronounced. You see, the way something is written, we don't pronounce it. It remains in the text. So it remains there, but more hidden. The way something is pronounced is the way it's articulated to others, right? If I look at a book and I see a word written but I can't pronounce it, it means that remains only in the text. It doesn't come out. Remember also that when you write a letter, it's different than when you say a letter. For example, how do you write Aleph? You write, how many letters does it take to write Aleph? No, just Aleph. One, Aleph, right? But to say Aleph, well, how do you do it? What did I just say? 3 letters, Aleph. So you see, pronouncing is elaborating, it's extending it. It's bringing it out into revelation, Aleph, where in the writing it was just 1 letter. But I could say but if I want to really explain to you the letter Aleph, I can't just say I'm saying Aleph or Beis or Gimel. Gimel is 1 letter, but when I say Gimel, when I write Gimel, it's one. When I say this, Gimel, Yud, Mem, Lamed, Gimel. One of the fascinating Kriya and Ksivs is in this story. I don't know if you noticed it, but I'm going to ask you to go back to Pasuk Chaf Hey and take a look. Vayihi baboker, it was the morning. Vihinehi Leah, and behold, she's Leah. Do you see what's going on here? What does it say? It says he Leah? Take a look at the word. It says hu Leah. He is not spelled Hey Vav Aleph. How do you spell he? Hey Yud Aleph. That's not what the Torah says. The Torah says Vihine hu Leah. 1 second. He's Leah? She's Leah. What's going on here? He's not Leah, he's Yaakov. He married Rachel. There was a switch with Leah. Well, that's why we don't pronounce it, right? That's why we say Vihine Leah. When you listen Shabbos to the Torah, you Vihine Leah. It's not how it's written. The sages were very, very attentive to this. That means there's something interesting going on here. He's Leah. What does that mean? Is there some confusion here? Huh? So what's Pshat Vihine Hu Leah? Essentially, they understood something was happening here. What was happening? Yaakov discovered that she is Leah, but he also discovered something else. That he's Leah. How did he discover that? Because Leah told him, I am you. I am a mirror for you. You have just been given a gift. I'm holding up a mirror to you. Me? I didn't do this switch. Oh, did you do the switch? Of course. You did exactly the same switch. You're the younger, you camouflage yourself as the older. I'm the older, and I camouflage myself as the younger. So that one little switch, which we can't pronounce because it wouldn't make sense, but it does make sense on another level. So it's not who Leah genetically or biologically, obviously, but V'hinehu Leah, this characteristic that he was so hurt, that he was so upset, was really he himself. It's the basis, one of the bases what the Baal Shem Tov says, that when we look at others, we're often or always looking at a mirror. Now, it's hard to digest. What does it mean I'm looking at a mirror? I'm not looking at a mirror, I'm looking at you. Every time I look at somebody else, I can understand sometimes they call it projecting. I'm projecting. But every time I look at somebody, it's a mirror. But the truth is, there's a very profound truth to it. When the Baal Shem Tov says, when you look at somebody, you're seeing a mirror, he doesn't mean that I can't see something in somebody else that is a fact. I could see that somebody is wearing a coat with a certain color, and it doesn't mean they're mirroring my coat, because my coat has a different color, obviously. What he was saying is, the way I see it is always based on who I am. Two people can see the same thing in somebody else. They're triggered in a different way. Their response is different. And very often, the way I'm responding to the other's experience, and not very often, always, is a mirror for something inside of me. In a very practical sense, if I have a particular wound, and I see something in another person, that may trigger my wound in a way that somebody who wouldn't have that wound wouldn't be triggered. It doesn't mean the other person is a tzaddik. It doesn't mean the other person didn't make a mistake. But it means that first and foremost, it's an opportunity for me to look inward and see, wow, what just happened? And this is where so much powerful growth can happen in life, especially in relationships that are closest to us. And therefore, it's people who can get under our skin in very, very profound ways because of the closeness. Here, the mirroring is always more dramatic. It's more intense. So it's a real opportunity to be able to be curious and inquisitive and ask myself, what just happened inside of me? And it's simply like somebody once gave me a metaphor. You know, if I go to a friend of mine and I slap him on his back and I say, how are you, Yankel? And he says, wonderful, how are you? But I slap him on his back and he starts screaming, ah, you're killing me. What happened? I didn't know that he was in Miami for a week. And he was sitting. And he got a sunburn. And his back changed colors completely. And the sunburn is really, really active. And now when I gave him a slap on his back, it hurt him terribly. It was a sunburn, right? If he wouldn't have had a sunburn, he wouldn't have screamed that way. When somebody tells me something and there's a sunburn over there, there's a sunburn, it hurts. Wow, of course I'm triggered. Of course I'm upset. Of course I have to dismiss this person. Of course I feel like in danger. If I am ready to do the work, I could look, what was the sunburn that this person just touched? What is it? Because then perhaps there's so much agency in this. This is the difference between always being reactive and simply defining my life based on other people's issues, good or bad, versus having so much more agency and being proactive in my life. This is all this one change. He Leah? Yes, of course she's Leah. No, she's Leah. But she's Leah is only showing you that you're Leah. And you understand it so well because of something inside of you. So that's where Chazal right away see this. Great. We're still, though, questioning this very issue. Let's say Yaakov needed a mirror. Great. So now I want to ask you a question. If you stole something from somebody, now I steal from you. And you say, why did you steal from me? I had to be a mirror for you. Doesn't work that way. Let God decide how you're going to find out about it. So therefore, I'm going to start copying every criminal so that I can be a mirror for them. That's very immoral. And let's remember, the whole Jewish nation is built from this. This is not an isolated marriage in Kentucky or Wyoming or Hawaii. This is the marriage from which all of us come. The whole Klal Yisrael comes. Take a look, please, in your next source sheet. When the Torah introduces us to Rachel and Leah the first time. You remember it describes the eyes of Leah as weak and Yaakov and Rachel's countenance as beautiful. Why do we focus on the eyes of Leah? So take a look in your next source, Vayeitzei Chaf Tes Yud Zayin. This is Genesis chapter 29, verse 17. Ve'enei Leah rakis v'Rachel hoisi yifas terevas. Mine says Rashi. And Rashi didn't invent this. Rashi is quoting a Gemara and a Midrash. Shahaisa svura lalos b'garoloi shel Esau v'boicha. She thought that she's going to end up marrying Esau. And she was crying. Shahayu hakoil oimrim, because everybody used to say, Shnei banim leRivka, shtei banois leLavan. Rivka has 2 sons. Lavan has 2 daughters. Great shidduch, hagdola legadol, vaktana lekatan. The oldest to the oldest, the youngest to the youngest. Rashi says, Hayu hakol oimrim. Like this was the talk of the town. Every WhatsApp group in Mesopotamia and in Israel, Hayu kulam. And even the WhatsApp groups in Japan and in China, in New York and Los Angeles, Muncie and Lakewood, Borough Park and Williamsburg, even Kiryas Yoel and Brazil. Kulam, everybody was busy with this shidduch. Interesting expression. The whole world, everybody was busy with this shidduch. There were no other shidduchim to talk about. So you could say Rashi is just semantics. Kulam means, everybody means everybody in the Ichveis, in the Shtibel, in Evergreen Uptown. Everybody. But it's an interesting expression. And why is everybody's business? Everybody was a shadchaner? I could understand the parents said it. I could understand Lavan saying it, Lavan's wife saying it, Rivka talking about it. Rashi says, Kulam oimrim. Everybody was saying. It makes sense. Lavan, Rivka, they're siblings. In those days, they kept marriage in the family. You see already Avram wanted in the family. And as a result of that, Lavan has 2 daughters. Rivka has 2 sons. The oldest to the oldest, the youngest to the oldest. And this made Leah weep and sob so deeply, so intensely, it affected her eyes. The Gemara says, Baba Basra Kufchav Gimel Amar Aleph, V'hoisa boichat shenoshru risei eineha. She cried so much that part of her eyebrows fell out. V'hainu deceive vayar Hashem kisnu Leah. It says later that Hashem saw that Leah was hated, she was loathed. My snua, what does that mean? Efsher snua mamish? What, Yaakov hated her? Efsher bignust behemet meile dibur akasav, bignust tzadikim dibur akasav. Torah doesn't even like to disgrace an unkosher animal. In the Parshas of Noach, it doesn't say Noach took every behemoth tmeya, every behemoth that was contaminated. It says behemoth asher einena tahora, a behemoth that is not pure. And here to disgrace Yaakov Avinu, who's righteous, and say that he loathed his wife, he despised his wife, he hated his wife. You're not letting him be married in such a situation. You just say Vayar Hashem kisnu Leah, and this is what he tolerated from himself. No, Ra Kadosh Baruch Hu shesnuin ma'isa Esau b'fanah. Snua Leah means that Hashem saw that the actions of Esau were loathed by Leah. They were loathed by Leah. Snua Leah, she could not deal with Esau's disposition, with his behavior, and therefore was so hurt and pained and in anguish and distressed by the idea that what? That she's going to end up as a soulmate. 1 second. Very interesting. But it says kisnu Leah. It doesn't say kisana Leah. It doesn't say Leah hated somebody else. It says Leah was hated. Now you're telling me she hated what Esau did? So I'd say kisnu Leah. So you say it's a Midrash, it's a Gemara. I don't know. It says Hashem saw that she was loathed. She was loathed means that there was something about her that was loathed. By who it doesn't say. We assume Yaakov, the Chazal say it wasn't Yaakov. Fine. So now you're saying, no, it really means that she was loathing Esau. She despised and hated Esau's behavior because it was unrighteous. It was wicked. What is the meaning of this? There's another issue. Already in Parshas Chayei Sarah, if you remember the story, Psuel, Rivka's father, did not want Rivka to go home. Lavan also said, let her wait a year, 10 months. Don't just take Rivka away. Don't just take Rivka. And Eliezer said, no, I want to bring Rivka to Yitzchak. Please, God wants this shidduch. You see what happened at the well. You see this incredible coincidence. I came to the well, I prayed. And what did they say? What did Lavan say? And her mother, Nikra l'naira v'nisha lo espia. This is something you have to ask the girl. This is something you have to ask the girl. She's going to decide who to get married. And Rashi writes, Mikan she'ein mesiyin es ha'isha ela midaita. You can only marry off a daughter, and any person midaita, it has to be consent. And we understand why. A relationship, by definition, is a relationship. It's a connection. If I'm forced into a connection, what type of connection is it? So even this is non-Jews before Matan Torah understood, right? And it's a halach, obviously, till today. It has to be midaita. It has to be from her consent. So what was Leah worried about? They were saying that I'm marrying Esau. They could say whatever they want, all the yachnas, yenta, dvashas. I don't care what they say. Somebody comes into a girl and say, everybody is saying that you're marrying this boy. They could say whatever they want. They could marry him too. These are not the people that had spines. You see that Leah responds to Yaakov. You see that she could protect herself. And generally our matriarchs were very, very powerful people. Rashi says that the avos were tafel. They were subservient to the imayas, to the matriarchs in Nevi'us and prophecy. So people are saying that you're going to marry Esau. They have to ask me. They have to ask me. Even Rivka knows that. Lavan knows it. He's the one who said, ask Rivka. He knew it. The girl has to agree. That's basic level of decency and humanness and normalcy that Lavan understood. He's the one who said it by Rivka. It was his sister and his mother. Rivka needs to agree. And then Rivka said, they asked her, do you want to go? We don't want you to go. And what did she say? Eilech, I'm going. I'm going. And then she went. And suddenly here, the next generation, Leah is sobbing. Why are you sobbing? It's called mikvanayas. You know what mikvanayas is? Okay, whatever. The truth is that there's a deeper story here. When Rashi says everybody was saying, it means not that every person in the world was saying. It means that there was a truth. When you say everybody is saying, it's a way of saying there was a truth that was inherent in the universe that was saying it. Right? There was an energy, and Leah knew that energy. It wasn't that somebody decided to make a shidduch and I couldn't care less what they say. I have to decide. Rather, kulam oimrim means this was something. People were picking up on something. Right? Sometimes there's an energy, people are picking up on it. There's a vibe, you can detect it. That's what she was experiencing. Still, I'm the master of my destiny. So let's go to the next source. For this we have to go back. And here we continue part of the theme of what we began last week. What happened when Rivka was pregnant with Yaakov and Esau? The Torah says and describes this pregnancy as very tumultuous. Now, there's a lot of pregnancies in Tanakh, a lot of births, a lot of pregnancies. This is the only pregnancy that is described in such a tumultuous form to the point that Rivka questions her identity. In the beginning of Toldos, Vayeitzei abanim bekirba, we spoke about it last week, and Rivka says, Lama za anochi, why do I exist if this is what's happening? So Rashi explains, why was she so perturbed to question her existence? So Rashi says, Rabbi Seinu Darshu, the second line, Rabbi Seinu Darshu, Lashon Ritza. Yaakov There was a crisis that she was feeling, an existential moral crisis. When she passes a center or an entrance to Torah of Shem and Aver were the monotheistic sages that created yeshivas dedicated to serving Hashem. Yaakov is kicking. He has this desire to leave the womb. But when she passes Pischei Avodah Zarah, entrances to go into ashrams or monasteries or centers of idolatry, of pagan worship, of behavior that was immoral and promiscuous, human sacrifice, or whatever they were doing in these pagan places of idolatry, this child is kicking. Of course, later she finds out it's twins. Esau is kicking. So Vayeitzei, this is really bothering Rivka. Lama za anochi. To the point that she questions herself so deeply. Why am I? But now we have a huge question. Who decides what you do in the womb? Who? Tell me. I don't know if anybody here remembers that time. Right? But do you think you had a lot of agency in the womb to decide what to do, where to go, how to react? Of course not. Barely now we have agency. We try to teach ourselves how to have choices. And that's even many, many years after we came out of the womb. In the womb, my responses are completely genetic. Based on what was given to me, however you want to describe it. Essentially, I'm manifesting my mom's genes, my dad's genes, my mom's moods, my mom's experiences. You don't blame a fetus for what happens in the womb. So 1 second, this seems very unfair. We call Esau Harasha. Rashi says already from the womb, he came out. Already you see they were kicking in the womb. Why is he called a Rasha? That's not fair. That's classic predeterminism. This kid was already, his nature, his proclivity to idolatry was not something he chose. Even if you do it at 3 years old, there's no choice. There's a reason bar mitzvah is 13, bas mitzvah is 12. Till then it's considered child's play. You don't even have any responsibility then. In the womb, you're not even conscious of it. Who knows what they did in the womb? I don't remember what I did in the womb. I mean, they have certain therapies and journeys where people could sometimes go back to those places, and they're pretty intense stuff. No question. A lot happens in the womb. Maybe most of life, or at least a lot of life, is a continuum of what happens in the womb, especially during birth. It's a complex sugya. But certainly there's no blame game here. There's no agency here. So why do we even call Esau the wicked? And then Yaakov is called the tzaddik. He's the tzaddik, he's the Rasha. Nobody had choice. Their fate seemed predetermined from the womb. I understand if Esau grew up a fine bachadol, and then he was 19 years old, and he said, bye-bye, okay, you're attributing it to him. And even though you have to know, even then you have to know exactly what the factors were, but fine. We want people to feel that they have agency. There's a concept you said called bechira, etc. But the poor kid gravitated to paganism from the very start of his formation in his mom's womb. How could you blame him for his genes? That seems cruel. That seems so unfair. The answer to this is vital and fundamental to an entire understanding of Yiddishkeit, to understand what Judaism. And to show you how far it reaches, I want you to take a look in the next source. Heichel HaBracha Parshas told us. Heichel HaBracha is a fascinating commentary on Chumash by the Rebbe of Kamarna. He was one of the great Kabbalists and Hasidic masters of his generation. And this is what he writes. So you could see here the nature of what we're learning. Harasha Hazeh. This Rashi is referring to Esau. It's Parshas told us. Ilu haya boicher b'toiv. If he would have chosen goodness, haya yachal liyas tzaddik gadol elef pa'amim Yaakov. He would have been a tzaddik 1,000 times greater than Yaakov. It's very dramatic. 1,000 times, not 100 times, 1,000 times. Ki Yaakov hisig b'hasagas Moshe. Because Yaakov managed to comprehend the consciousness. Yaakov vibrated with the consciousness of Moshe. V'hu, but Esau, im hayaraytza livche b'toiva yachalalis l'madregas Mashiach. But if Esau would have chosen goodness, his consciousness would have expanded to the consciousness of Mashiach, which is known as Yechida da'atzilus. The level of Yechida, which is the 5th level of the soul. There's 5 levels, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida, of the world of Atzilus, beside Admoini im Yefei Einayim. Who is called Admoini im Yefei Einayim in Tanakh? David. David, of course, is known as David Malka Mashiach, the progenitor of Mashiach. David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. Who else is called Admoini in Tanakh? Only one more person, Esau. Esau is Admoini, and David is Admoini. And when Shaul sees David is Admoini, he gets worried, but the pasuk has Im Yefei Einayim, with beautiful eyes. Interesting. Einei Leah Rakos. Leah's eyes we focus on. Now David's eyes. By Esau it doesn't say Yefei Einayim. So the Kamarna says that was the difference. He remained an Admoini. He didn't get to the Yefei Einayim, to the beautiful eyes. In fact, when Shaul saw David HaMelech, he says he's reminiscent of Esau. So Dayik says, no, he's Yefei Einayim. Chazal say, Zeh hoirig midas Sanhedrin, v'zeh hoirig loy midas Sanhedrin. David is a warrior just like Esau. He's also a man of the field. But he always seeks to do, he tries to do midas Sanhedrin, which means what Torah says. Not like Esau. What's the Heichel HaBracha telling us? Well, 1 second, you told me that from the womb, he was already gravitating to idolatry. That's what Mashiach looks like? Heaven forbid. Mirav Sinigri, this is so strange. This is so enigmatic. The answer to this is fundamental to life. Maybe one of the most important lessons in life. Never ever confuse the struggle with evil and evil. They're not the same. The fact that I struggle with something very dark is not dark. The fact that I may be experiencing a deep, deep challenge, physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, psychologically, only tells me what my mission is. It's not a verdict if I'm good or bad. And to compare two people and say, why can't you be like this person, is not only foolish, it's also cruel. Take Esau and Yaakov. Even if Esau would have turned out to be the biggest tzaddik, he would have never looked like Yaakov. He couldn't look like Yaakov. Their entire chemistry was different. They had different souls. They had different bodies. Even if Esau would have turned out to be the holiest person, which is what Yitzchak wanted, and that's why he wanted to bless him, he wanted to bring out his strengths, he would have never looked like Yaakov. We make the mistake of thinking he would have never looked like, he couldn't look like Yaakov. You have sometimes two siblings in a family, and one of the foolish things is to start comparing them. One person is brilliant in music, one person is brilliant in math, or other types of thought. Why can't you be like him? Because I'm not. Right? Reb Zusha Vanepoli famously said, when I come to heaven, they're not going to say, why weren't you like Avram Avinu? Because I'm going to have a very good answer. Guess what? I ain't Avram Avinu. He didn't say it that way. Why weren't you like Moshe? Because I'm not Moshe. So that I'm not worried about all these questions. They're foolish questions. The only question I'm thinking about is, why weren't you Zusha? Why wasn't Reb Zusha Zusha? Oh, that's a question. Why weren't you authentic to you, not to anybody else? Everybody has a different vocation, a different destiny, a different soul. People in the same family, even twins, even identical twins, who are fighting over the same nutrients and the same placenta of mother Rivka. But it's a different journey. So he says if Esau would have perfected himself, he would have been higher than Yaakov, but not Yaakov. So one of the great mistakes a person could make is the fact that I'm struggling with something teaches me that I'm bad. I'm being penalized, I'm being punished, I'm a bad person. If I wouldn't be bad, I wouldn't have to deal with this. No. On the contrary. Like we learn here, Esau's struggle was his path to greatness. So the fact that from the womb he was struggling towards idolatry, that was God's choice, that wasn't his choice. Everybody needs to know, people are chosen by Hashem to struggle with different things, and nobody understands why, how it plays out, where it plays out. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it usually a combination of both? Is it genes from my parents? Is it epigenetic, meaning from many generations? Is it I'm carrying something in my soul that is very, very intense? But one thing is sure, it's not a punishment. It's a vista to your greatness. This is confronting these challenges is the way that I unlock the safe where my soul's light is stored. You'll say, why can't I just open the safe without these challenges? That's a good question. I don't have an answer to that question. But all of the story of life is that every person is given a choice to be able to confront all of the darkness that exists in their life, knowing that deep, deep inside there is an indestructible, divine, infinite, limitless, joyous, serene, and blissful core. But to get to that core, I often need to dig and excavate and move away the debris and the sand and the gravel, like Yitzchak, to find the Be'er Mayim Chayim. The story of Yitzchak and told us is that he dug well after well after well after well. What's the idea? The water is there and it's amazing water, but it's covered over by dirt, it's covered over by stones, rocks, and I need to shovel and dig and excavate it. And everybody needs to understand, therefore, that it's a different mission. And the mission that one person has, you could never ever compare to a different person. Some souls are destined to travel on a much more smooth terrain. And some souls are given an ATV. You ever went on those mountains? It's a different terrain. It's a different journey. They struggle with different demons, skeletons, tribulations, ups and downs. Everybody struggles, but nobody knows what degree. Some of us struggle with mental illness. deep, deep emotional challenges. Stories of the past that haunt us. Sometimes people had to deal with abuse or Holocaust insanity that they went through or their parents went through. This is something one needs to be very humble. When we look at somebody, it's very easy for me to say, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Come on. Take your pills and get out of bed. Learn from me. I was up 3 a.m, you lazy couch potato. Why do you think you have money to take you to every therapist in the world? Because I'm up 3 a.m. working hard. What's schlafstub is 4 o'clock with your stupid devices? Whew. Breathe. Breathe. There's pain. You're in pain. Right, that's pain. But there's also a mirror here. That's what Leah, what are you seeing? Because a much deeper question is not what's wrong with you, but actually what happened to you. And how can I help you see that and with empathy and compassion find your strength and resilience. And that's a very, very subtle difference, not only in semantics, but in my regulated presence and demeanor and how safe you could feel with me. So from personality disorder to different traumas, to different challenges, it could be from depression to other deep, deep emotions that we deal with, including in our marriages, with our own children, with ourselves, with our upbringing, everybody in a different way. Our path to truth is never identical. It's never identical. There's no such a thing. Nobody could be on the same path. We can hold hands. We can look at each other's path. Sometimes I can join you on your hike. You can join me on my hike. But essentially, your soul is a vibration of Hashem's light that is uniquely yours. Even as I speak to you, you know what an interesting thing is? We're not going to do it because it's going to take a few hours. But if we would pause this class and everybody here would be interviewed and asked what they heard me say the last 5 minutes, do you know that no 2 people will say the same thing? I've done it. I know after classes people give me feedback. They send me emails. They share with me. They text, whatever it is. It's like, wow. I never said it. I never thought of it. I never dreamt of it. I used to sometimes get a little annoyed, but now, no, of course. Nobody ever hears what anybody else says. And I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, even if you're trying to. I don't mean you're not listening, you're not interested, like some conversations between couples. It's like, this one wants to answer, I'm just waiting for you to finish so I could show you that you're wrong, right? You know those conversations. I'm saying from a much deeper place. All I can give you is words. It's your soul that understands anything. And your soul is going to understand it based on your soul's wisdom, based on what the cosmic intelligence and love of Hashem is channeling through your soul. All I can do is give words and letters and construct them and hear. But letters themselves are lifeless, right? It's like stones of a home. You could build a home, but somebody has to live into the home. So now it's letters, and what do you see through those letters? It's all based on your wisdom, your emotions, your experience. Now I know sometimes I may say a fact, and everybody will hear the same fact. But those are like just facts. When we're talking about the internal landscape of a human being, people experience it so differently. And as a result of that, we need to understand that generally there's 2 very different types of missions. If so, Yaakov and Esau are not about a tzaddik and a rasha from the womb. No, they basically had 2 different souls. Most of us are a hybrid of both. But when you say they had very different souls, it means that lechatchila, initially from their creation, Hashem chose them to be completely in different paths. Yaakov ishtam yoshev eholim. He's wholesome. He's a channel for divine energy. It's who he is. It's his chemistry. It's his makeup. Esau, he would have to conquer. He was a hunter. He was out in the field. It's not just physically, it's also emotionally. He needed to be able to conquer. He needed to be able to dig deeper. He needed to be able to confront his darkness, because once you learn that your inner darkness is not an invitation to despair and immorality, it's an invitation to transformation and growth, everything changes. In life, we need both. We need role models for both. We have souls who emulate the Yaakov paradigm. We have souls who are inspired by the Esau paradigm. Never to give up on your inner light. I heard a clip from Rabbi Moshe Weinberger on Vayeitzei. So he said beautifully, he said, Tzaddik Nister, Everybody translates as what? A concealed tzaddik. But there's another meaning to the word nistar. Right? One of the malachos, one of the 39 labors of Shabbos is bona, building. And what's the opposite? Soser. Listor, to demolish. Right? Stira is a contradiction that undermines the paradigm. So tzaddik nistar is a tzaddik who gets nistar, who gets destroyed. Soser. There's two models. There's a model in which I discover something and I embrace it. And then there is, I have something and then I get challenged. And it gets destroyed, it gets demolished. And in that experience of demolition, emotional demolition, I come and I see a gut job. You know, sometimes you come to a property, around here we have a lot of that, and you just see a gut job. And like, what is this? It's a churban. No, it's a tzaddik nister. It's a different type of light that can be born from the gut job, from the demolishing, from the devastation, from the breakdown. Mashber in Hebrew is a breakdown. It's also the word that we use for a woman giving birth. Isha yoshevet al ha mashber. How can that be? Because every breakdown is also an opportunity for a new birth, for a new discovery. Lifnei shever gone. The puzzle lifnei shever. That's talking about a rasha. Lifnei shever gone. There's an exaltedness, the pride that comes before. That's talking about Haman and others. So the idea here is, in every person's life, there are things that are broken, very difficult. Esau really needs to confront these dark thoughts, these dark stuff. It's not easy. But the Heichel HaBracha tells us, and that's what Yitzchak understood, if he can look that in the eyes, but with compassion, but with conviction, and with unwavering strength, work through it, he comes to deep, deep heights that are unprecedented. That's the B'china of Mashiach. That's the Admaini of David HaMelech, im yefei einayim, with beautiful eyes. So the redness, which represents, so to speak, blood, there's a lot of aggression there, there's a lot of intensity there. It's painful. But deep inside, I could find my light, my innocence from that space. And it's such a powerful message for all of us because people look at their lives. And this one is dealing with rage. And this one is dealing with depression. This one is dealing with laziness. This one is dealing with disassociation and shutdown. And this one can deal with criticism. And this one is disassociating and feels emotionally dead. And this one becomes completely aggressive and confrontational. I can't be in a relationship. And this one needs to go into narcissism. And this one into borderline. And it's hard, it's really hard, because when when those forces get triggered, my natural instinctive reaction is just to go back into my old rut, to respond the same way. Right? And it takes that deep courage. I told you what Viktor Frankl said, between stimuli and reaction. There's a millisecond. That's where all freedom lives. Right? That millisecond. Of course I was stimulated. Of course I want to confront, I want to run, I want to attack, whatever it is. Verbally I want to shut down, I want to gaslight, I want to drift away, I want to stonewall. I get it. Everything is coming up. All the scary stuff are coming up. Can I pause? And really look at it, almost like a child tantruming. Literally like a child tantruming. And then lean into a deeper place. And ask myself if this reaction is going to really reflect my deepest, authentic convictions and love. And if not, maybe I can choose a different response. Now all those demons will say, no, we're here to protect you. Go down this route. Essentially, this is what Yitzchak so craved to show Esau. Yitzchak saw Esau in ways that he couldn't see himself. And the blessings and the intimacy and the love that he had to him was trying to show Esau what he saw in Esau. Because the only way anybody could see themselves is to have at least one person in their life to see them. In order to be able to see other people, you have to be able to see yourself. I don't know if there was one person in history who saw somebody else if they did not see themselves. You cannot see somebody else by forcing yourself to see them. Because that's not called seeing them. That's a transactional relationship. I can only see somebody else from a very deep, regulated place. From a very deep place of trust and regulation. It's like the maternal gaze or the paternal gaze, but here I'm talking about the maternal gaze. There's a regulation there, a menuchas hanefesh, an inner serenity and tranquility where you just see it. You see it in its core, and then the person with God's grace can see it in them. That's what Yitzchak was constantly trying to do with Esau. The tragedy of Esau was not his struggle in the womb. That was his greatness. That was his opportunity. I once shared maybe with you a letter I once saw. It says 1986. And I was in somebody's house actually I went for a lecture somewhere in the States, pretty far, and it was somebody's house, and I saw the letter over there. It was not public at the time. This was 1986, and there was a bacher, a yeshiva boy, I don't know, yeshiva boy, not a yeshiva boy, was a bacher, and he wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he's struggling with homosexuality. Then this was not spoken a lot about. This is 1986, so it's very, very rarely spoken about. And I don't know his letter, but I saw the response. It was a long response, like a 2 or 3 page letter. Very, very compassionate, but really in-depth response to him. And I saw it then. I was pretty shocked to see it. And he wrote there, interestingly, a lot about neuroplasticity. That they're now discovering, this was just the beginning of the time, that in neuroplasticity they're going to learn that when people define themselves a certain way, it's a very, very narrow perspective. With neuroplasticity, you could see what's going on in the brain. There's so much development that's possible. And then he wrote some other things, but there was one line over there, one paragraph, that really touched me in an amazing way. He says, you ask me, why did God do this to me? I did not choose this struggle. I want to be like my friends. Why did God do this to me? So he writes to him, I'm not saying it verbatim, just the concept. He says, I don't know, because nobody knows the journey that Hashem puts every person on. I just want to share with you one point that it says in Sfarim that could be helpful, perhaps, if it resonates. And the point the Rebbe made to this young man was as follows. Sometimes a person has within themselves a light that can heal the world, that can have a tremendous positive impact. But they don't know about that light. And the system, the way we live is, we're not given free lunch here. It's called Nahama de Chisufa. We don't get bread of shame, which is just everything is free. Every person works to create their life, to find their light. What happens if you have an incredible light, but you don't know about it? How are you supposed to find it? It can't be given to you because then it's not yours. You don't own it. What somebody gives to me is not mine. It's not even internalized. So you need to find it, but how are you going to find this incredible light? It's so deep. And those are the obstacles that people have in their lives. Those challenges are the training ground. That when you work through these stuff, you are forced to build a deeper relationship with yourself. You need to find yourself in a deeper way. You can't just go back into your comfort zone. Some of you know this very well. Those of us who had to or have to or do struggle with serious stuff. Everybody struggles, but there's also levels. I can't just fall back on, cliches and, everything is good, hashgacha pratis, amuna betach, which are all good and authentic. But I need to really find that, live it, embodied. And it's in that work that you're going to do as you deal with this, as you deal to overcome this and find your inner intimate power, that on the way you're going to stumble on your light. You're going to stumble on your light. And history is changed forever because of this. The tragedy of Esau was he never saw it in himself. He saw his darkness as a destiny rather than an opportunity. He saw his dark. You could write that down. He saw his darkness. It didn't come from me. It just came through me. He saw his darkness as a destiny rather than as an opportunity. Rather than training ground. Rather than a boot camp to build you up into the vessel you need to be. Every struggle is really creating the personality you need. The pressure you're feeling today is the pressure you're going to be able to endure when you have to deal with what you deal with and you have to cast your light. But instead he just saw it as an invitation for despair. He didn't understand the depth of who he was, even though it was deeply in his soul. So now, once we understood this about the pregnancy and the birth of Yaakov and Esau, now we have 2 sisters in another country, in another family, not such a different family, first cousins. We have 2 sisters. The older one is Leah, the younger one is Rachel. The Torah tells us one thing about them. Einei Leah rakos. The eyes of Leah are weak, and Rachel is Yefei Torah v'Yefei Mara. Is beautiful. What essentially is the Torah telling us? So now, just look at the words. Anybody knows a good Hebrew? What does the word Leah mean? Midkite. How do you say that in English? No problem. Yeah. Leah means one who is exhausted, one who is weary, one who is oizgemuchet, one who is, that's English, one who is oizgemuchet is just better than everything, right? Oizgemuchet. Mid is probably German. Midkeit is exhaustion. Now, who names a girl the one who is exhausted? Wow. What did the therapist think about that? What's your name? Leah. Wow. Well, your mother was exhausted 24/7? Probably. And that's what she decided to immortalize in my name. The one who's exhausted, the one who makes me exhausted, the one who makes everybody exhausted. What does the word Rachel mean in Hebrew? Rachel. Rachel. What's Rachel? A U. E-W-E. A U. E-W-E, which is sheep, the sheep family. Ki Rachel lefnei gozezeha ne'elama. Rechelim are sheep. Interesting name. Interesting name. The one who's exhausted, the sheep. Wow. They had imagination at that time. Yeah, we hear Rachel, Leah, Rachel, Leah. We're talking about the first Rachel and Leah. There was a lot of thought that went into it. So you're a sheep and you're exhausted. Interesting. Now if you look at the gematria of Rachel, is 238. Rachel is 238. The Ramemi Fano, one of the great Kabbalists, Rabbeinu Menachem Azaria Fano in Italy, 17th century, he writes, the gematria of 238 is almost in the beginning of Torah. The words Vayetzei, and there was light. Vayetzei is 238, like Rachel. What's going on here? Why is Leah exhausted? And why is Rachel Vayetzei? And why is Rachel a sheep? What's the color of sheep? Most sheep? White. Which is considered the most docile, calm animal? What did your grandmother call you when she wanted to give you a compliment? Shefale. Why not Hintale? Why not Ezale? Why not Kemale? Why not Leibale? Okay, that was your brother. Why not Hirshale? That was also your brother. Why not Volfale? That was your uncle. Okay. Shefale. Because sheep are very, very calm, placid. Even when they do meh, it's ma'ir rachma, rouses compassion. Yeah? The Torah says in Vayeitzei this week, V'haksavim hifrid Yaakov. Yaakov focused on the sheep, he separated the sheep. Esau is called Ish Sayir. What's a Sayir? A goat. Goats are different than sheep. Goats are sly, goats are more aggressive. You put a fence and the goat goes up. Even the color of sheep is a bright white in sensory integration. Kids who are afraid, sheep are the easiest because they're very calm. Very, very calm. Rachel is a you, Vayetzei. Leah is exhausted. What is going on here? Take a look in your next source. My Mari Admir Hazaken Tofkuf Ayin Beis Inyan Kisnua Leah. A discourse from the Balatanya Al Rebbe. Al Kei Nikras Leah Shumi Loshen Ayefus. Leah comes from Ayefus, exhaustion. Kemoi Vayilu Limtzai HaPasach. In Siddim, when the Malachim sent the people away, it says Vayilu, they became exhausted, they were blinded, they couldn't see the door. Again, they were blinded, their eyes were affected. Shehi Nil'eh Tamid, she is always exhausted. Wow. Why is Leah always exhausted? This is interesting. Now I want to ask you one more question. Little trivia. There's one person in Chamisha Chumshe Torah who's described, a male, as exhausted. Anybody remembers who? One person who's described, how do you say exhausted in Hebrew besides Leah? Ayef. You remember? One person who's described as being exhausted in Chumash. Yeah, what was it? What? Yes, Parshas told us last week, Vayavom min hasadeh v'hu ayef. Esau came from the field and he was exhausted. Interesting. Why is that relevant? I understand he was hungry. That's why he asked Yaakov for lentils. Why do I have to know that he was exhausted? Say he was hungry. Let's say he wasn't exhausted. Let's say he slept 9 hours, but he was hungry. Some people, they're not exhausted, but they're hungry. No. He came from the field and he was exhausted. Interesting. And then Leah means exhaustion. But this is where we start realizing what's going on. You see, Leah, the Zohar says, is Alma de Iskasya. She's the subconscious. Rachel is Alma de Zgalia. She's the conscious. Leah represents the characteristics inside of us that are more complicated, disturbing, complex. There's parts in every one of us. What do they call it? The good, the bad, the ugly. There's parts in each and every one of us that are just bright. It's what you write on the resume when you want a job, right? You don't write, I'm exhausted, I have crazy insecurities, you don't want to see my relationship with my mother. That's not what you put on your resume. It's not what your boss wants to know. Your boss wants to know you're responsible, you know how to run a team, you're efficient, you know how to deal with pressure, you have it together, you're on time, you're a balabusta. Huh? Multitasking, of course. You're also empathetic, you're kind, you're normal. That's a big one. I don't write on my resume, I have streaks of insanity in me. There's parts of me that want to run away from the universe. Sometimes I wake up and say, Lama za'anoichi. So that's in your resume. But the Torah is not a resume. The Torah is truth. There's parts in us that make us exhausted. Think about your children. There's the child who never made you exhausted because that child was up 7 a.m, dressed himself, 8 o'clock. They left the house. They made breakfast for themselves. They always had snacks from the night before. They did their homework. Shine. Invite me to the chasana. Where do you find it? By your neighbor. Yeah. By your neighbor. And then there's a child who kept you exhausted. And you already knew it in pregnancy. You know that. You already knew it wasn't pashut. This child makes you exhausted. Why? Not because he's superficial. Usually there's a lot of depth there. But there's something that has to be worked out. Sometimes it comes out later in more dramatic ways. It's not easy to deal with Leah. Not in yourself, not in others. It's those parts in your life. Think about it. If I would ask you, if there's 3 stories in your life that you could press, Control, Alt, Delete. If God gave you the opportunity, here, my dear Shefala, pun intended, take any story in your life, 3 of them, could press Control, Alt, Delete, they never happened. What would they be? Think about it. You don't have to say it loud. Think about it. Control, Alt, Delete. Because these are the things that make us uncomfortable. These are the things that challenge us. They are the things that may have affected our personality in unbelievable ways. These are the things that created dysfunction or created deep, deep fear, panic, insecurity, created an inner critic, an inner sniper, created cobwebs and cages and splintered maybe parts of me to the unconscious. Of course, these are exhausting. Not only that, some of us, I would say, much of our life, we are busy with, this is deep, avoiding facing that which exhausts us. And that's exhausting. The only thing that's more exhausting than exhaustion is trying to deny exhaustion. If I can look at it, it's exhausting, it's hard, I can cry, I can be there. But when I'm not allowed to even look at it, so much of my life I'm busy denying those parts. Do you understand how many distractions I need to create? Do you understand what type of popular rabbi I need to become? Or what a successful businessman I have to be? Or what an amazing balas chesed and woman I have to be in the community? Do you understand the pressure I have if I don't give that shear on top of the world, that's on top of the world? If I don't make that success, you know what's going to happen. It's all subconscious, it's not even a choice. You know what's going to happen? I may have to face I can't face that. My whole life is invested in avoiding this ability. Of course, Esau was exhausted. He was exhausted. Whenever you're living in dissonance, you're exhausted. Whenever you're not in flow, you're exhausted. Whenever you're not in touch with all the parts of yourself, it's exhausting. Whenever there's a hand in me that always has to go like this, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. Emotionally, you know how exhausting that is? But we have mechanisms. One of the best today is the phone. The moment it comes up, I have to text you. Oh, that's an interesting clip, Rabbi Vayeitzei. Let's go there. Problem is, Rabbi Vayeitzei is talking about this. Okay, we'll go to another clip. Trump. Trump won't be talking about this. Don't worry. He'll be talking about another achievement that he created. That also gets you exhausted. Okay, so then you go, so I'm anti-Semite. So now you can get angry about what he said about Israel, and you're done. You're healthy. And you send it to your family. What's up? I never knew he was such a Soini Yisrael. Baruch Hashem. You have a new Soini Yisrael in the family WhatsApp. Good morning. Good morning. You and Columbus discovered America. And sometimes when you say, well, pause, can you not take this? Why did you just take this phone? Why? Most people don't even know. But we do know. Our consciousness said there is something I need to distract from. And this is unbelievable. Some of us do what's called binging. I'm familiar with that one. There's always, you go to the pot. I went to the pot 5 minutes ago. There was nothing there. But because of my deep emunah, I believe that Hashem put man into the pot the last 5 minutes. You see people go to the refrigerator. 20 minutes later, they go to the same refrigerator. What, Costco made a delivery? Instacart from heaven? Well, what happened in the last 20 minutes? It's irrelevant. You're not looking for food. You're looking for a distraction. If there's no refrigerator, I'll go to the freezer. If there's no freezer, I'll go to the safe. Maybe there's kukish cake in the safe. Who knows? From a previous dealer, 20 years ago, he was in the house. Maybe he put kukish cake there. Everybody in their own way. And some of the distractions are not bad. They can even be interesting and sometimes productive. But avoiding the exhaustion is very exhausting. What was the uniqueness of Leah? She didn't avoid it. She couldn't. It was her name. Every time she looked at herself, this is Leah. That means she was in a conversation with her exhaustion. Rachel is different. Rachel is Vayeitzei. It's a beautiful you. It's calm, it's placid, it creates compassion. Rachel is light, Vayeitzei. Rachel represents those parts of us and those parts of our children that are just bright, luminescent, delicious, geschmack. It's lovable. It's easy to love Rachel inside of you. With Leah, we have a complicated relationship. We're scared of it. We're scared of it. And that's why we avoid it. That's why we don't want it. Kisnua Leah. We don't like it. It's hard to look at those things. But here's the deal. This is so real. This is authentic. And this is my deepest path to greatness. Shem HaGdoila Leah. So Chazal say Gdoila. From her came Kahuna. From her came Leviah. From her came Malchus. Priesthood. Levi, Leviah, the Leviim, Malchus, world to Yehuda, all from her. Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron, it's all from Leah. Shem HaGdoila Leah. It says Gdoila. What was it? Here comes the shidduch. Shahayu Hakal Oimrim. Everybody was saying Leah, Esau, Rachel, Yaakov. This wasn't a couple of yentists that were making shidduchim because they wanted Shatchanas Gelt. This was in the energy of the universe. Leah and Esau. Leah was a mirror for Esau. Esau was a mirror for Leah. They understood each other. Rachel and Yaakov mirrored each other. Leah was the mirror image of Esau, but there was a huge difference. Esau avoided his exhaustion. He came back exhausted and he told Yaakov, feed me, stuff me. He doesn't say feed me, stuff me. How do you know you're eating because you're having attention, emotional tension? How you eat. When you eat with mindfulness, you never stuff yourself, right? You see the beauty in the piece of food. You make a bracha. You eat with meditation. When I stuff myself, it's not about the food. It's about avoiding the discomfort I'm dealing with. The same is true with all other distractions. All other distractions. Whether it's gossip, whether it's slander, whether it's work, whether it's being busy. I'm doing it. There's an urgency. Do it now, right now. Haliteni, stuff me up. Mina adom hazeh. That's why he's called Edomi. Who calls somebody Edom because of the food? Because the lentils were red? Since your mother gave you red lentils, that's why you were red? Come on. That's why he's called Edom. But that's the point. His eating, all of his stuff, they were basically distractions from his redness, from his intensity, from his tension. Leah could be the tremendous wife for Esau because she can understand him. But ultimately, Leah took a different path. She took her struggles and turned them into opportunities for unprecedented growth. She became Hagdoila Leah. But essentially, Rachel really can understand Yaakov, and conversely, and Leah could really understand Esau. So now, when Leah hears about this shidduch, she's crying. What is she crying? Vayar Hashem kisnua Leah. It's not just she was hated just because she hates Esau. What does that mean? Why does she hate Esau more than Rachel? It means we only hate that which is part of us. Something that's, you'll see, you get annoyed with people who remind you of yourself. People who never remind you of yourself, okay, they may have a challenge. If somebody has a spouse and my spouse is triggering me, it's because it's my sunburn. It doesn't mean my spouse doesn't have issues. Doesn't mean my spouse, what it means, what's inside of me gets triggered the most. And it's an opportunity. Esau speaks to Leah from a deep place. She knows Esau. Kisnua Leah, there's an element of Leah that she struggled with, that she doesn't like, and she must work it through, because if she does not, she can get stuck in that negativity. So now, Esau is Ayef, Leah is Ayef. But because of that, we have here two models. It's known as the tzaddik and the Baal Tshuva. Tzaddik and Baal Tshuva doesn't mean somebody who's FFB and somebody who did return to Judaism later in life. That's maybe technical. We're talking about the essential model. You could have from birth and verplunget from birth. The model of a tzaddik is somebody who's channeling God's wisdom and energy in a more wholesome and direct way. The Baal Tshuva is like Yitzchak. I have to dig. That's why Yitzchak digs the wells, because in this relationship with Esau, I have to dig through the sand and the gravel and the dirt to find the water. I fail and stumble. Sheva Yipol Tzaddik V'kam. I fail and stumble. Tzaddik Nister. Tzaddik Nister. Because I have to deal with things that get demolished. And Nister also, it's concealed. I have to go deep inside of me. So this is a tumultuous individual who battles the darkness and finds light inside. Of course, Leah's soulmate was Esau. Not because people were trying to punish her. This was essential to the system. But here is what happens. Esau never became that person. Unfortunately, Esau remained disconnected from himself. In fact, it even happened when he died. When he died, he was beheaded, and his head was buried with Yitzchak. His body not. Because that's the tragedy of Esau. In his source, he's very holy. In his manifestation, he never manifested his holiness. That's the tragedy of so many people who struggle with darkness. If you go deep down, you will see that they're innocent. They're very pure. Sometimes they're more pure than others, and that's why they shut down so much. That's why they avoid dealing with it so much, because they're so sensitive. They're so pure. Sometimes I see, you talk to somebody and there's such a stone wall, because they know that if they let you go in, they're going to sob for years. So they don't go there. Some of you know in your own relationships, people who have built so many heavy walls because they're sensitive. And they know once you penetrate that wall, oh my God, it's going to be very difficult. You think the Niagara Falls has a lot of water flowing? Wait till you penetrate his wall. Oh my God. The tears are going to flow for who knows how long. So we avoid it. It's much easier. It's not really easier. It's torturous. It's exhausting. We're always looking for another distraction until you get sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know what that means? And when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, then you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And simply you don't have no patience for it. You can't. I just don't want it anymore. It's too torturous. Am I going to live my whole life to live in this mask to impress a few people who will give me compliments? I'll feel good for like 29 seconds until the next distraction. Or will I finally go into flow? And even when I go into flow, there's always training for the next level. And the next level, you peel one layer, and then there's another layer. And then 1 second, I worked so hard. You worked hard, amazing. But you still didn't find your full light. God is not punishing you. He sent you to Normandy because you're going to defeat Hitler. The soldiers that went to Normandy weren't punished. They were skilled. They were amazing. They liberated Europe from Adolf Hitler. Yamach Shema. Everybody liberates the world through the challenges that they face. It's an incredible gift. But I need to be able to face it with compassion and take care of myself in the process. So now what happens is Rivka understands that Esau is not going to be doing his job as a partner to Yaakov. Yaakov representing the tzaddikim, Esau representing the Balei Tshuva. So Rivka calls in Yaakov and says, Yaakov, you're going to have to do both. One day, Esau will join. One day, there will be complete unity in the world. But till that day, you need to also put on Esau's clothes and identify with Esau's struggles and become a model and a patriarch for every single type of soul. The struggling souls and the whole souls, the tzaddikim and the Balei Tshuva. Esau is not there yet. You need to carry two mantles, the mantle of Yaakov, the mantle of the tzaddik, and the mantle of the Baal Tshuva. You need to be a father for both types of Jews. You need to be a father for both types of children. The Jew who's pure originally, and the Jew who struggles with skeletons. So you need to dress up in the clothes of Esau. You need to tell your father, Anoichi Esau b'chayrecha. I am Esau. You need to find within yourself the soul of Esau, the personality of Esau. Like when actors put on a uniform to be able to feel that identity. You need to be able to relate to Esau's struggle as a role model, as a father for that type of Jew. But you know what happens at that moment? The moment Yaakov puts on Esau's garments, and he goes into Yitzchak, and he takes Esau's blessings, and he says, Anoichi Esau b'chayrecha. You know what happens at that moment? Who becomes Yaakov's shidduch? Who now becomes Yaakov's soulmate? Leah. At that moment that Yaakov assumes the identity of Esau, he now acquires a new soulmate, and that is Leah. So now he comes to Haran. He's working for Rachel. Rachel is his dream. Rachel is his spouse. Rachel is the person that relates to him most. Yaakov and Rachel, that's, what do they call it, 2 peas in the pod. They always said, Yaakov, Rachel, Yaakov, Rachel. Rachel is Vayeitzei. Rachel is the ewe. Rachel is the sheep. Yaakov is Ish Tam, Yoshev Ahalim. A sheep is Tam. There's a wholesomeness to it. It's not sly and shrewd and crude. Yoshev Ahalim sits in the tents. It's not a hunting animal. It's not a predator. It's keves. It's very, very docile. There's a submissiveness there. There's an easygoingness there. Vayeitzei. It's light. It's light. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's that tzaddik. It's that child, you know? That easy, smooth child. You hatch them, you match them, you dispatch them. And the only time the principal called you in 15 years was to tell you that she's going to be valedictorian. That's the only time you got a call from the office. Only time. And then there's the kid, usually twice a day there's a call for like 12 years straight. And alamol nachamaisa. So you have here Yaakov now goes to Haran, he's working with Rachel. And now Lavan makes that switch. In the morning he sees Leah. He says, wow, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Why did you do this to me? Leah responds. We thought she was responding with a snidey remark. You are the biggest liar of all. I'm just a student of yours. Really, she was giving a very profound message. My deception is a continuum of your story. I belong to Esau. Rachel belongs to Yaakov. The moment you told your father you were Esau, you chose me as your wife. You chose me as your spouse. The Esau within you must marry Leah, just like the Yaakov within you is going to marry Rachel. Leah teaches Yaakov the art of struggle, the ability to be able to find yourself easily hating so much of your life, easy seeing all the complications and wanting to run and hide and becoming mediocre and avoid and confront and fight and flight, all of that. And then to learn how to transform them into your light, into your love, into your greatness. Because only that will allow you to carry your destiny with grace and really own who you are. It's the rite of passage. That is what gives you the rite of passage. To sever my bonds with everything that was toxic and holding me back and come out on the other side uninhibited, free, in a very deep and regulated and authentic place. The darkness is not the destination. It's the path to your infinity. Leah is the Shem HaGdolah. That which made me exhausted in life becomes the deepest cause of your ultimate elation. But what's happening here, and here it comes together, is not just, this is how it happens. Leah says this to Yaakov. It's really an internal journey that happens in every person's life. Think about everybody's marriage. I can't say everybody's, but think about a lot of marriages. Right? We look at this story, it's like, what a weird story. Let's think again. I would say many marriages, maybe most marriages. I don't want to say all marriages because it's hard to say all. But let's face it. Many marriages. You think you're marrying one person. You date, you have courtship, it's beautiful, it's exciting, whatever happened. And I think this is what the relationship is going to look like. That's the Rachel in your life. And then there is Leah. Leah is not the person I thought I was marrying. Leah is the person I actually married. Now, what does that mean? That means then every person themselves, in our own marriage with ourselves, we have it. There's my relationship with me in my mind. There's who I think I am, and there's who I am. And sometimes it takes a lot of work to get there. And ultimately, to marry my Rachel, I need to be able to marry my Leah. I will never really find my light if I'm not ready to look at my darkness. I will never be able to love Rachel for real and embrace Rachel and be with Rachel. Vayeitzei, 2:38, Vayeitzei, and there was light. If I don't first make peace with the parts of me that are so exhausting. And it's really very literal in a marriage, and it's incredible because there's the spouse, the husband or the wife that we imagine, and then there's the spouse of reality as life goes through and people see and things emerge. And here is where it gets tested. It's easy to love Rachel. Rachel fits into my comfort zone. Leah challenges me. Somebody once said, we don't love other people, we love our version of them. We don't love other people, we love our version of them. I have my version of the other person. Great, it fits into my comfort zone. Leah challenges me. So on one hand, I could say, oh, I don't want this. I'm running the other way. That's what a lot of people do. And sometimes it may be the right thing. Sometimes it may be the right thing. It's very, very sensitive topic, this. Very sensitive. What can also happen, and this is an incredible moment when it happens, is when both a husband and a wife could say, wow, can we talk about that? Can I talk about that which is challenging me, which is scaring me, which is overwhelming me, which is making me exhausted? Can you talk about that? Because what happens then is, from that space, the connection that is created is indestructible. When you know how to connect in your link in your weakest link, that part of the marriage which should have torn you apart, when you bring connection to that space, to that vulnerable space where there is loneliness, where there is fear, where there is exhaustion, where I feel criticized, or I feel unsafe, or I feel I can't trust you, or I feel overwhelmed, or I feel you don't just get it. If we can really be present in that space and see what's behind it, what is it, and to be able to find the love that's over there, the fear that's over there, the yearning that's over there, the safety, the security that I've been searching for, the connection, the authenticity, and bring it together, and suddenly my darkness becomes not scary for the other person, but maybe an opportunity. And the other person's darkness becomes an opportunity for me. Suddenly we work it through and we see what is really the gift over here. And then the connection becomes indestructible because this is a connection that permeates the person through and through and through. But it doesn't come without exhaustion. It doesn't come without a lot of work. So as a result of this, when we appreciate this, we hear, see how this very Midrash about this conversation between Leah and Yaakov in the morning, it's all in that word. Vayar baboker vihine hu Leah. Hu Leah. He was Leah. Don't blame Leah. You're Leah. Why? Because you became Esau. That was your destiny. And the moment you became Esau, who Leah, you became the soulmate. You became the second half. A husband and a wife are halves of a soul. Who Leah? He's Leah. Not just who Leah that he lied. Just like Leah lied to him, he lied to his mother. It's much deeper. Who Leah? You are actually the soulmate of Leah. That's what's happening. That's what Leah was explaining to him. It's not I lied to you because you lied to your father. No. This is the process of how life develops. Indeed, the Yaakov in you is going to marry Rachel. The Esau in you marries Leah. And so he becomes the father of all of the souls of the Jewish people as we work through life and we appreciate the fact that Esau and Yaakov were two sides of the ultimate unity that then has to come together. It's not an easy struggle because Rachel and Leah ultimately, their children grow apart. This continues in later generations, right? Yosef is from Rachel. Binyamin is from Rachel. The other brothers are from the other person. It's not so easy. It's not easy because there's a deep tension here. And ultimately, there's two different streams, Rachel and Leah. And I need to be able to embrace both, to the point where it's fascinating, and this is what we conclude with. Who is Yaakov buried with? Leah, not with Rachel. It seems a little cruel. He's buried with Leah almost 4,000 years, 3,600 years. It's Yaakov and Leah in the cave. Rachel is buried somewhere. There's a reason for it. Rachel wanted to be buried there, the famous story. Rachel Mavak al Banah, when they go into exile. But what is really a very deep message here. Okay? And you'll see it in every wedding. At every single wedding, there's a custom called badekinish. Badekin. What's badekin? We veil the bride. Why do we veil the bride? One of the reasons is because Leah was veiled. So Yaakov didn't see her. If there wouldn't have been a veiling, Yaakov would say, "Ups, it's Leah." He had to wait till the morning. So we veil the bride. 1 second. Does that make sense? Shouldn't we unveil the bride at every wedding so we don't go through this disaster again? You know, under the chuppah, when he puts the ring on her finger, right? Many of you remember. He didn't see the kala didn't see him. She was veiled, and in some circles it's a really thick veil. What's pshat? I don't understand. He should take off the veil and make sure, not somebody else. I understand before, but not during. So what's pshat? It's funny, no? Look at him. Look at her. What, are you trying to replicate it? But this is the core of the story. The core of the story is what Yaakov learns is that it was the Leah elements of his spouse that were really meant for him to be able to become the person he was supposed to become. And ultimately in life, Rachel passed away early. He lived most of his years with Leah. Ultimately, in other words, emotionally, the two sisters become one. It turns out that the Leah elements of one's husband or one's wife, if they're ready to do the work, they're not always ready to do the work, but if they're ready to do the work, it comes out that was meant for me to become the person I was supposed to become. And that was meant for Leah to become the person she's supposed to become. And therefore the badekin, when we took the badekin, you know what we're really saying? We're saying something very deep. And that is, I'm not only ready to marry the parts of you that I see now. I'm ready to marry the parts of you that I can't see now. They're going to come out later. Maybe I won't even always be aware of them. But I'm ready to be in a relationship with the parts of you that I don't see. And the only way I can say that to you is if I could say it to myself. I'm ready to build a relationship with the parts of me that I don't see. Because it's the parts of me that I don't see that will be able to connect with the parts of you that you don't see and that I don't see. Because those are the parts that are very deeply connected in a very mysterious way. And if we could make room for that, that's where true wholeness is created. The true magic and mystery of love is created there. Have a wonderful week.